All right. Well, we are continuing the sermon series called Ordinary Sinners. We've been looking at people like Adam and Eve and Noah and Moses and like Samson, King Saul and King David. And when we may look at these at the first blush, we're like, oh my goodness, these people are such like heroes of the faith. They didn't do anything wrong. Well, maybe they did little things wrong, but by and large, they're just following after God, and they just never like fall or anything. But what we end up seeing is that, especially near the ends of their stories, they keep having like another, like they have falls. Like they have things, and we end up seeing that they're ordinary sinners. But the good news is that God works through those ordinary sinners. Now, last week, I told you that we were going to do like Hosea or something like that. That's because I don't actually know the schedule that we are on, and we are doing Nehemiah today. We are on Nehemiah. Nehemiah's fascinating a story in the Bible, and it's really great. Basically, what's going on in Nehemiah, Ezra and Nehemiah, if you've heard of the book of Ezra and Nehemiah are basically the same book, kind of the same story, just kind of split up a little bit from two people's perspectives. But this is after God's people have been conquered by Babylon, and they're in Persia now, and Nehemiah is talking to the leaders around in Persia, and he's like, "Hey, can we go back to Jerusalem?" And they give Nehemiah permission to go back and check out the city of Jerusalem. And he goes and sees Jerusalem, and he's just kind of falls into depression almost. You know, the walls are broken down to the city. There's squatters living in the city. He's like, oh, it's just so decrepit and terrible. And he goes back and he's like, can we go back and rebuild the city and inhabit the city once again? And the Persians let him. They go like, yeah, you guys go back to your hometown, rebuild and all that. And Nehemiah, the book is about them gathering the people around, and he has them rebuild the walls. And there's all kinds of difficulties that they go through it, but like with Nehemiah's firm, good hand on the wheel, they go through there. But it's not only do they rebuild the walls in the city of Jerusalem, but they kind of rebuild their faith as well. They end up reading some of the scriptures. Ezra ends up reading some of the scriptures to them, some of the law, and they're like, oh, they begin crying. And like, we haven't been doing any of this, and this is God's way for us. And they implement all these new things in the way of life, and everything looks like it's going well, like they're rebuilding all of this. It's a really like an amazing story. And do you know what? In the church, like, I need to tell you guys something. In the church, there are trends that happen. Not in this church too, but like church world, globally, kind of in the country and all that. There'll be trends on certain sermons that are done and certain sermons that aren't. In the last 10 years, Nehemiah got real popular. Like almost all of my friends, a lot of acquaintances and all, did Nehemiah as a sermon series. And it's, you know what it's always used for? Like, think about it. You guys are probably smarter than the average pastor, all right? Like over there, they're building walls or rebuilding the city. What is it used for? Capital campaigns, right? Like, we're building up, bigger and better, right? Like we're doing all these things and they're used for campaigns. Like, look, let's be like Nehemiah and all the people of God. Let's look at these things and build this stuff together to bring us into closer and better and all that stuff, right? Like it makes sense. And that's what it looks. Nehemiah looks like that. It starts with such hope. It starts with such hope. All right, let me shift gears a little bit. One of the places where I see a lot of hope start is projects that people do. Have you ever had a project that started with such hope? Right? Maybe a project in the car. I know, Ken, you start to do the cars and all that stuff. A lot of those projects started off with a lot of hope and grandeur, right? Like that's like over there. I know I've started a couple of projects with hope and all that. One of the things that I've gotten into lately, and actually a lot of people from my generation have gotten into this, and we've gotten so into it, we're in the middle of killing it right now. We've gotten into TikTok. Has anyone else gotten into TikTok? No? No one, right? Like, you're like, oh, there's no way we get into TikTok. And it's over there. It's okay. Like, millennials are in the middle of killing TikTok for the younger generation. You boomers killed Facebook for us. That's all right. Like, it says we got to kill off our own things as we get into them, right? So we get over there, and TikTok, at least when I see it, it's a lot of like hopes that begin and they kind of get dashed. Here's a good example of it right here.
Public service announcement. Don't try TikTok trends with your kids without testing them first.
So he puts a drill battery in the Hot Wheels of his daughter's Hot Wheels right there.
But she was so excited about it and didn't want to wait for me to test it.
Let's ride. Whoa, careful. Slow down.
This thing used to barely move with her on it before I swapped the battery out for my drill battery.
Fast, huh?
Now it drives like it was built by Elon Musk.
Oh, too fast, huh?
Oh, it's scared her. It's so sad. What are you laughing at a child crying for? You guys should all be ashamed of yourself. She was scared. That's so many, like he was like, all right, we could try putting this drill battery. He's probably got tons of those drill batteries, in there. We could put those in there, make it a little faster, make it easier to charge and all those things. And it just ends in tears, right? Just ends in tears. There's so many projects in like that. And so Nehemiah, this project of his, rebuilding the walls, everything is going well. And things start getting sticky. Now, I got to be honest with you here. We did the book of Nehemiah back in 2017. And we got inspiration from all my friends and other colleagues that did this Nehemiah sermon series. But there was something interesting about all the Nehemiah sermon series that my friend Mark and I were looking at as we were writing these. They left something out. There are 13 chapters in Nehemiah. They only ever covered up to chapter 12. Why are they leaving out 13? Is it just filled with names? Well, there were some names in it, but why are they leaving it out? Like, what is going on in Nehemiah? And my friend Mark and I, when we were writing that sermon series back in the day, we're looking at it. We're like, why are they leaving this out? And we read chapter 13, and we're like, oh, that's why they're leaving it out. It's because everything falls apart in chapter 13. Like, it's hard to do this big, grand capital campaign. Let's build all of this together. It's going to be so great. And then have to end the last sermon with but it's not going to work out. Like, it's hard to ask for the big ask, like all those things when that is happening. But that's what happens in Nehemiah. It all falls apart. So what ends up happening is they're building all these things. People are devoting their lives to God. Everything is going all great, and then Nehemiah decides to go on vacation. He doesn't really go on vacation. He goes and checks out something else. And when he comes back, suddenly the train has fallen off the tracks. Like it's people are, the Levites aren't doing what they're supposed to do. People are working on the Sabbath. Oh my goodness. Like they're intermarrying with other people around them that over there. They're not, staying true in the marriages. They are buying and selling things. Everything is just falling off the tracks. And Nehemiah is just like, oh no, this is awful. And let's see how he responds to it, because Nehemiah has really shown that he's been a good leader this whole time. How would a good leader do that? Maybe he'd bring people. It's like, hey, what are you doing? You've gotten off the rails here. Let's get you back on the rails. Let's do this again. But let's see what Nehemiah does. Notice this is Nehemiah chapter 13, and he says, "But I warned them and said to them, why do you lodge outside the wall? If you do so again, I will lay hands on you." Easy. like I don't think that's like some of our other Christians, brothers and sisters, with laying on of hands. I don't think that's what he's talking about, is he? No, he's talking about beating them up. Now, if some of you were going out there and it's like, listen, you didn't set up the cookies well enough. That's where it's gonna. It's if you do this again, it's gonna come down to blows, right? Like you would look at me and go like, that's not good leadership material. He should read How to Win Friends and Influence People. You don't do it by beating them up, right? But that's all of a sudden what Nehemiah does. I'm going to lay hands on them. And from that time on, they did not come on the Sabbath, like over there. And then we skip down just a little bit more, and I confronted them and cursed them, beat some of them, and pulled out their hair. Right? And I made them take an oath in the name of God, saying, you shall not give your daughters to your sons, or take your daughters for your sons or for yourselves. Like this, I mean, what happened to Nehemiah? It all fell off, the wheels fell off the wagon, right? It all fell apart. And it's almost like he lost all of his will, and he just resulted to his baser instincts and just became violent, and things came to blows. It says that he pulled out people's hair. It started off with such hope, and it just ends with tears, right? That sounds so familiar to me. Because I can see that in my own life too, where things started off with such hope, and they end with you really feeling like, is this the way? I mean, after all, look, I've got pastor robes on and stuff like that. I went to the whole pastor training, and they call that seminary for the uninitiated. And so I did all of that, and coming out of it, it was like, oh man, I know what to do. I know how the secret sauce. We're going to make this, and the church is just going to pop, and it's just going to be amazing, right? It was those years after that were some of the hardest. There were some years, and I currently have friends that have said things that I've said in the past that are basically like, well, let's just give it one more year, and if it doesn't work, we'll do something else, that's, and I talked to so many other people that they have hope. They had so much hope in that something was going to happen, and they've watched it all collapse around them. And they watched it all collapse, and they're like, I don't know how to deal with this now. I don't know how to do, and many times when things begin to hope around us, we may act in ways that we're not too proud of. I'm not saying that any of you pull out hair, but like you may get frustrated and yell at other people. I think we look out at the world today, a lot of us, and we get so frustrated, like why is this happening? We just get angry. And we begin to accuse all kinds of other people. It's like, oh, it's your fault. You're the one that does it. And we start glorifying violence towards others in those circumstances. We start acting in Nehemiah when that happens. And one of the things that concerns me with how sometimes the church teaches Nehemiah and how we teach his general life is that we say this. We'll say we're saved by grace. Yes, we're saved by grace. But the underlying message is you need to do this, this, and this in order for God to bless you. We won't say it in as many times, but we'll say those things kind of out loud. And then what happens when the church is just building up this, we live in this perfect community and everything is great, and then something happens. And it brings everyone down. They're like, well, where's the hope? Where's the hope in all of this? And I think that's something that Nehemiah is asking. Because remember, this is the last chapter. And if we go down to the end of the chapter, this is the last 2 verses of the chapter. He says this, thus I cleansed them from everything foreign. I established the duties of the priests and the Levites, each in his work. And I provided for the wood for the offering at appointed times and for the first fruits. Then he says this, remember me, O my God, for good. And it ends. It's the next book after that. That's how it ends. It's not end like, look at all the amazing things we did with God. Yay! It doesn't end that way. It ends with remember me, oh my God, for good. What in the world? But I remember the first time I read that. And I remember going, oh, I felt that before. When the ashes of the world around you have all collapsed, and the only thing you can say is, remember me. At least remember me for the good I've done, right? Like at least remember me for that as you look around at everything, how everything started with so much hope, and now it's just tears as you souped up the power wheels a little bit too much because you don't actually know what's going on with electronics. But we feel that way. So I know that I have felt that way. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we look at these people and we're like, they just were perfect in every way. And it can leave us feeling like, how things that think, oh man, it can leave us really feeling like, how can I go forward? What can I see from all of this? It feels like it's a road to perfection, but we got to remember that this book may end here. But as we go into the New Testament, we get to the book of Hebrews. In the book of Hebrews, Jan read from Hebrews chapter 12, but chapter 11, right before that, it gives us this heroes of the faith. It talks about Moses and Noah and all these people that we've been kind of looking at lately. It goes through the heroes of the faith and everything that they did and talks about everything that's amazing. And then after that's done, after it talks about all the heroes of the faith, it goes into chapter 12. And I want you to hear what it says because it's related to how we're feeling about the end of Nehemiah. So if we go to Hebrews chapter 12, it says this, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, all those people, right? All those ordinary sinners, right? So there's a great cloud of witnesses. Let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. So let us keep on going, right? Even though we may face some setbacks. And let's see what it says next. Looking to Jesus, the founder and the perfecter of our faith. Other translations say the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame. He endured the cross, the downtrodden, the low times, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. And I want you to pay special close attention to this next little bit. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. The author of Hebrews, which we don't know who it is, we think it might be Paul, but we're not sure who wrote Hebrews. But he talks about all these heroes of the faith, just like we have been doing. And then he talks about Jesus. And he says, look to Jesus, who is the author and perfecter of your faith, and realize that Jesus went to the cross, that he endured the cross. And then as we go down a little bit, he goes, he endured from sinners such hostility against himself. That is a huge statement towards us. Because there have been so many times when I've set up hope and go, this is going to be the new way, I'm going to make it, I'm going to do all these things. But all of a sudden when that hope comes crashing down and the real life around us has messed with us all down here, we can then read what he's trying to say here, is that Jesus endured the sinners and hostility that was against himself, that he went to the cross. And what's beautiful about that, to me at least, and I hope it is to you, is that what I think the cross is telling us is that if Jesus never went to the cross, if God never went to the cross, we'd always have to ascend to get up to God. Even though that's not what all the stories are telling, that's not what Nehemiah is about. But what we end up seeing is that Jesus on the cross is that God always meets us. no matter what is going on, no matter where we are in life, that he endures the cross to meet us into whatever situation we may find ourselves in. What dark valley? And from there, it's like a seed growing into a plant, busting out and bringing life into the world from those pits of despair. And I think that's what God is trying to say in that story of Nehemiah. Is that it's not about how Nehemiah was all perfect and all that. It's that God still worked through all of that even after it all collapsed. Because Jesus allowed the collapse onto himself so that we may all have life. So, what do we get from this? You may face a collapse in your life. You may face that. You may face that. But Jesus is still with you. And he's bringing light into your life. And that light in your life can go and bring light to all those others around you. And I think that's good news. And it's a hope that's just deeper than what's just existing right here. So let's end right there. Let's say a prayer. Jesus, we thank you that you love us so much and that you are with us. Continue, Lord, to lead us through those dark paths. Lord, help us to see how you are leading us through, just like you led all those ordinary sinners. That we see that you work through us in the good times and the bad. Thank you, Jesus. Amen.